Yeah, it's my pleasure to host you, and there is once again a lot to talk about. And of course, this morning talked to AWS Velki project, um, which is once again a response to what Redis was doing. Last time we sat down, I think it was Spain. We talked about OpenTofu. So, so I'm kind of seeing a pattern here. Okay, but before we go into all those nitty gritties and all those things, I want to talk about a larger picture of open source. I mean, open source keep going up. Companies do their things as the market changes, but in last couple of years, we have seen some developments which are not. I mean, I would not call them positive or natural. I think. What are your thoughts on things like these?
I think we're hitting a point where some organizations are looking for where's that next revenue bump going to come from, where's that next improvement to their valuation going to come from, and that's perfectly fine from a business investor perspective to have that conversation and think about it. Uh, where I think we're seeing an issue is that mucking around with the open source licensing that underpins a lot of software that people took a dependency on. And they took a dependency on it because it was open source. If it wasn't open source, they would have had a different conversation or a different evaluation of it, whether they wanted to take a commercial dependency on a commercial product that was being licensed to them. And so it's one thing where, people who are doing startups right now go do a startup and make it commercial, make it proprietary, use a source available license. All those things are fine if you're starting from that point and your value proposition to somebody is, hey, here's a source available license and you can see the source code and we can easily, talk about the source code or what improvements we might make to that source code. But they would be entering into that situation knowing that that is a source available license that they're getting into. I think the problem we have now is that, after in some cases a decade of seeding this open source software out under a particular license, now suddenly changing it after there's other people contributing to the project, there's dependencies, it's become part of commercial stacks or solution stacks that somebody would not have chosen if they were making a decision about which commercial component to put into that stack. And so, or they might have built it themselves. And so we have all these situations coming to a head now where some of these projects that have been out there for so long suddenly are flipping the switch, and it just no longer makes the same value proposition sense for people to go forward if it's going to be under commercial terms. And I think the other aspect of it that people have maybe not written about a lot is that there's real developers in these situations. When you look at an open source community, it's not your typical product development team. This is a community of people who get to know each other, who like working together. They engage online. This becomes part of their identity as a developer, that they are contributors or maintainers to these projects. And when these companies are flipping the switch on the license, those developers who are out there in the community are suddenly completely cut off because, well, their lawyers and companies aren't going to let them contribute anymore. And the maintainers of the project, the companies who are making these licensing decisions, are essentially cutting them out of what has been their identity as a developer. And that's hard. How do you go and say, hey, I'm no longer a Redis developer because they changed the license. I got to go find a new job. That's hard for a developer. So I think what we're seeing is that from the top, you have executives and lawyers who made dependencies on open source licensed projects. And then you have the developers who are contributing, using, implementing, supporting it internally, now saying like, I'm in trouble. And so they got to figure out a path forward, and it becomes a build versus buy decision, right? And if you were working in an open community, then everybody already knows who each other are, and they know how to reach out to each other, and they're having conversations. Hey, maybe we should just keep maintaining this ourselves. And I think that's part of the discussions that's going to happen now as some of these licensing changes, if more come, is going to happen, which is this a build versus buy situation. And for developers, it's do I want to keep developing this situation? And when the developers get together, we see that they can move very quickly. Valky was announced or the license change for Redis was announced, and I think it was within a week we did the announcement with companies getting commercial quotes approved. It went through legal reviews and everything else. They moved quickly because they already knew who each other were. They already knew that this was something that they needed to have as an open option in that stack. And to have one company come and dictate the terms of it was just not going to work out.